So again, welcome everyone. Now that we've got that out of the way, my name is Jaime Constable. I'm the CEO here at the Alzheimer's Society, and I'm joined by our board president, Nelson Hagerman. He's going to be answering questions for you about tax and benefit related matters as we go along. Once again, we will have time for questions at the end of each section, so I'll just ask if you'd hold them till then, just for ease of technology. But you can also, you can put your questions in the chat pod and I will be monitoring those. Okay. So first, we're going to look at an introduction to dementia and financial awareness. So what are some of the important things we need to consider when there's a diagnosis of dementia that we are experiencing, or if we have a family member? What we know is that older adults in general have increased expenses related to living compared with more limited incomes. This is just the basics, and it can be more difficult paying for daily expenses and activities that promote quality of life and can promote health. Dementia can result in increased unique costs along with the progression. So being prepared financially really helps to promote quality of life. We try to tell people now, how do you live well with dementia financially? That's what today is about. How can we prepare to maximize our benefits financially, to maximize our quality of life? So in terms of planning for the future, and there's some really useful worksheets that will take you through this, so don't worry too much about having to remember these steps. Some of the planning, what it looks like is doing an assessment of your current financial situation, so your assets, liabilities, income, and expenses. And then thinking about what does the next 10 to 20 to 30 years look like? What are your goals? What are your needs going to be? And writing these things down and thinking about them, even in a, even if you're dreaming about what are the things that I would really like to do. Considering healthcare costs. So planning for costs that are incurred due to illness. Something many years ago, I had a financial planner come and do a presentation, and he said, we're often taught to plan for retirement, but when you're in your 20s or 30s, nobody really ever talks about planning for the potential of being ill in later life. And you have to plan differently. And of course, if you're here today, you know that. You need to consider what the healthcare costs are going to be when you're in the home, what they're going to be if a move is required, whether that's to seniors housing, community care, long-term care, or if there's a stay in hospital, what that can look like, in particular if there's an ALC or an alternate level of care time there. So again, setting financial goals is really important, and it is recommended. I'll recommend this now, I'll recommend it later. Even though you have all sorts of information, find a financial planner that you can work with. Have an expert help you. You can do a lot of the planning and decision making, and then just have somebody look it over and make sure that you're maximizing things and thinking about what you need to. Some of the strategies to consider are tax planning. So you're doing that today, understanding and taking advantage of the benefits. You can go back 10 years, I think, with a lot of them. So if there's things you haven't claimed in previous years, there will be ways to maximize that. Look at insurance. So what insurance do you have in place? Are there any places where you can maximize your contributions there? Disability insurance. There is a product called long-term care insurance as well that you can look at, that's provided by a variety of companies. As you're doing your planning, review your RRSP accounts, your employer-sponsored plans as well, your individual accounts, and modify your contributions now as needed to meet those goals kind of as you move forward. Same thing with investments. And of course, creating and working from a budget is really important, in particular as income changes. So why do this? Well, everything in the presentation is either research-based or best known practice. So what you can see with people who have these plans in place is they tend to report a better quality of life. They tend to use fewer non-beneficial medical care services. So they know what they need, they know what's available and how to get it. They tend to have reduced anxiety about the unknown. So just general mental health is improved. It also ensures that the person living with dementia receives the care that they want. So for a person with dementia to participate in care, they must be engaged early in doing that, and then they can lay out their wishes. Positive family outcomes are also improved with planning, including supporting families in decision making. So if you have multiple people who are making decisions about finances and healthcare, that's fine. In fact, it's great if you can have those open conversations and have multiple people doing it. And what you see as well is reduced costs overall for people who have plans in place. And then, so that's on the positive side, avoiding the adverse consequences. There is an increased risk of higher mortality rate and worse overall health in people who haven't done proper financial planning, increased risk of being unable to sustain funds for retirement and through to end of life. And it may lead to denied opportunities to express and realize wishes about care. So when to start planning? Again, while the person is still capable of participating in decision-making is ideal, now is best if you haven't already started. And just a note about decision-making considerations. So there's a whole section in here that is for the person who's living with dementia to understand what are their rights, the importance of planning early, and how you can support a person who's living with dementia in continuing to participate in decision-making, even if they might need some help. So there are strategies and techniques that you can use to keep people involved a lot longer than you think in making decisions. And to do that, you need to understand the basics of capacity as well, and important things about communication. This is Roger. He passed away, I believe, last year. But he is a person who lived with Alzheimer's disease. He was very passionate and an advocate. So he shared a lot of his story. And, you know, he was really passionate about keeping persons living with dementia involved in their care and engaged in decision making. In the slide deck, you can see there's the Canadian Charter of Rights for people living with dementia. And some of the applicable rights include that you're entitled to the same rights as every Canadian under the Charter. And you have the right to participate as fully as possible in the decisions that affect you. You have the right to get support and information that you need to make decisions that are right for you and to be treated with respect and dignity. So in all my years of working with caregivers and persons living with dementia, one of the things that people living with dementia have said to me is, I hate when people don't talk to me. They start just talking to my caregiver. Is that familiar? And, you know, there's a variety of reasons, but mostly it's inexperience. People don't know, they're afraid to make a mistake, but still, you know, people just need to learn that it's important to engage people and treat them with respect. So don't assume that a person living with dementia cannot make their own decisions. Just because someone has a memory loss or dementia doesn't mean they have a capacity issue. They might maintain capacity for many, many years before that becomes a problem for them. Memory problems don't automatically make someone incapable of making an informed decision. And they have the right to be supported in communicating their views and wishes and to make their own decisions until they are deemed incapable. And that is a medical decision, typically. It's a legal decision as well, but respecting the individual choices of the person living with dementia is key. And I hope you do keep your person as involved as possible while they can participate. So capacity is a bit of a thorny issue. You know, what does that mean? And there are different thresholds for capacity depending on the type of decision. So the threshold for financial decisions is higher, and the threshold for healthcare decisions is lower. So a person is said to have capacity for informed decision making when they are able to understand all the information relevant to the decision they are making. They also need to understand the possible consequences of the decision that they are making. And if they understand those two things, then they have a right to make whatever decision they want, even if you don't agree with it. Much to families upset sometimes because they don't always agree that with the decision the person living with dementia wants to make. So assessing whether a person is capable can be really difficult. And it might require a healthcare provider assessment. Typically it does. You need one or more doctors to do a capacity assessment. It's a formal process. A decision on behalf of a person living with dementia should not be made until attempts to support them in that decision-making have been attempted. And then after that, having a capacity assessment can be helpful. For the person living with dementia, early on, it would be really beneficial to select a substitute decision maker that you feel comfortable with. You need to consider their availability to take on the role itself and their understanding and respect for your wishes and values. You want to pick somebody who you think is going to make choices aligned with the decisions you would make for yourself. You want them to have the ability to work with others. So they're going to need to work with your family members and healthcare providers when they're making decisions. So make sure that they handle stress okay, and that they can work with other people and that they have the ability to resolve conflicts. It's really important. Ensure as well that you maintain open and ongoing communication with a substitute decision maker about your wishes and any changes, because we might make a decision and then we might change our minds on that decision a bit later. And of course, make sure that you complete all the legal paperwork that's needed for that person to make decisions on your behalf in an informed way so that they know what your wishes are. As dementia progresses, the person's abilities and capacity will change over time, and they will need support when making decisions about important issues like finances. In particular, finances are difficult when there's problems with abstract thinking. Whoever's making decisions on behalf of the person should really always use their known wishes to guide decision-making process. And if their wishes are unknown, because sometimes that happens, it's sometimes a very difficult position to be in, making decisions for other people. But if it happens where, let's say, things weren't written down or the wishes are unknown or unclear, try to decide based on the prior wishes and values of the person as you know them, weighing the risks and benefits to the person, the caregivers, family members, and others who would be affected, the effect on their physical and emotional well-being, and the impact on their quality of life. These are some of the things you should think about when making decisions for others, especially where you're unclear. So this is some supportive techniques that you can use when, let's say, you're sitting down to do some decision-making with a person living with dementia. And it's gonna, the techniques that you employ are going to depend on very person-centered, like where your person is at, what their current capabilities are, what their knowledge was in the past, the stage of their illness, how they feel that day. There's all kinds of things you have to take into account. Definitely be patient and give them time. Encourage them to think about it. They might want to think about it and write down their thoughts. So giving even time to make the decision, like over more than one day or a week, or coming back to it and having more discussions. Communicating in simple terms with clear language. Finding a time when the person is most alert. With persons living with dementia, sometimes they feel more clear in the morning, or maybe it's after they've actually been up and moved around. You know your person best, so try to have these kinds of conversations when they are best. Eliminate distractions. No radio, no TV. Try to have a quiet place. It's amazing how much attention those things can draw, and just the stress that they create in the distraction to the brain. Consider their pain level, meds that might cause drowsiness. And then if you need to, you can use props to assist, like photos or videos or recordings. Ensure that glasses and hearing aids are working, and then listen. And listening to what a person living with dementia is saying isn't about just their words. You need to watch them and listen to their face and listen to their body language, the tone of their voice, because they can still be communicating meaning through those things even if they have issues with language, even if they're having issues producing or comprehending language, they're still communicating. And then help by providing step-by-step guidance. So not what we're doing today. Today, we're walking through a lot of information and it's probably going to be challenging. But if you break it down and you take issues like step by step, it can be much easier, in particular as things progress. All right, and I think this is the question slide. So does anybody have questions about this little intro about the importance of financial planning, planning steps, and decision-making? And I just want to show you the resources slide as well. So you'll have access to a number of links after each session, but please go ahead if you have any questions about this session or this part of the session and put them in the chat pod. And I'm just going to look to the room here too. We'll move on because we have lots to do today. So risk management scams, there wasn't a lot of folks super interested in this. So I'm going to jump through, but if you have specific questions, please let me know. Risk management. Okay. So changes in cognitive abilities, memory and communication can impact money management. And some of the early warning signs, some of the things people actually notice before they notice memory issues is that the person is struggling to pay for something, or maybe they start forgetting to pay bills, or maybe they pay bills twice. Maybe they're having trouble balancing their banking, whereas they never did before. And through that vulnerability that the person living with dementia has, there's a certain innocence that's there. There's a susceptibility to financial abuse, as well as a susceptibility to scams. And those impact everyone. But they're tricky. They're literally designed to hit us in the emotion and to prompt us to click on them. So it's very difficult for us, let alone someone who might have some confusion or cognitive issues, to know, well, what's a scam and what isn't. So what you're going to see is that sometimes, again, you'll see somebody struggle at the checkout, they'll overpay or underpay. We've seen seniors get their utilities turned off because they didn't even realize that they weren't paying their bill. So these are some things in particular, if the person living with dementia is living alone, that you want to make sure you're helping them with. Difficulty doing taxes, and then impulse purchasing. Is there any other areas of impact that you've seen or that you want to mention? And people online, you can throw something in the chat pod if there's things you want to mention for others.
Some people haven't done that for years and years, like I've done it all, so don't worry, but he doesn't do any, he doesn't even ask if there's a cent in the bank or anything, it's no big deal,
Yeah, that's a good point. So what you mentioned is it kind of depends on who's taking care of the finances, whether it's a big issue or not.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's not an issue if the person with dementia hasn't been handling those financial things. They don't even notice any change.
No.
But then if the person with dementia is kind of attached to doing the financial things, they can get themselves into trouble doing things they don't know they're doing. Or it can be tricky for the caregiver who just doesn't have the skill set because they've never had to do to manage finances.
Yeah.
So it's then you have to learn how to do
Yeah.
that. The use of credit cards, should we decrease the limit? Yes, and that's we hear that often. And we're going to talk about that next, actually. So these are all the traps that people with, and you guys in the room can't see this, but there's all kinds of financial traps that a person living with dementia can fall into. But there's also ways to kind of help them avoid some of those things while maintaining dignity and participation and those kinds of things. Again, appropriate solutions are always person-centered. I can't tell you exactly what to do because it's going to depend on that person. Now, if you ever need help problem solving something on a unique individual level, please call us because we do that. We'll do that over the phone with you and talk through some steps you could take. It's going to depend on their financial habits, the stage of their illness, and the type and severity of their symptoms. Apologies. So here are some things that you can do. You can reduce the number of credit cards and debit cards that they use. Sometimes they might not care. They might just say, no, I don't need that anymore. But for some people, money is like a security thing. So they've always had these cards, they belong to them. They're not going to want to give them up, and you don't want to have that fight. So set up a joint access so that it can at least be monitored so that you know what's coming out and you know they're not being taken advantage of. Again, reducing the number, giving them some cash on a daily basis so that they have money to spend. Setting up daily limits can be really important as well, just to make sure. Because sometimes it's not them doing something. Sometimes it might be a phone call that they get where the person tricks them and then asks for the credit card number, and then boom, a whole bunch of money is gone. And that's, we've had clients have that happen. And then as well, in particular, if you're not living together, although it's just good practice, set up bills for pre-authorized payments as well. Any other solutions that you've used online that you found really helpful and in the room?
About keeping the bank card, because my mother always had her own bank card,
Mhm.
always had cash in her wallet. That's like a big thing.
Yeah,
It just to, you know.
it
really
is.
Still have that, you know, if you go somewhere.
That's right. Yeah. It's part of the dignity process and you know, yeah, and very much about security and who they are. And it's about the comment was that her mom likes having her debit card and cards in her wallet, that's always been like a meaningful thing to her. So
Another point it kind of relates.
Yep.
Might be to share, like, if this is my time for doing more online banking, when I'm moving some money into different places, just to simply share what you're doing in the same way.
mhm,
It might have been shared with you when you were doing less. In my case, Ron would have assumed a whole lot more of that, but he informed me. Where now I
Right.
feel like I, out of
Right.
respect, want to keep him as informed.
Yeah.
As I can.
So the comment was when you're making decisions on joint accounts, that you're keeping the person involved in the discussion about what you might be doing. So if you're reducing the limits, you tell the person that, oh, we're just gonna, you know, for safety's sake or whatever it is, you know, we're gonna reduce the limits, or we're gonna close this account or consolidate our accounts to keep them involved in what's happening. Okay, we'll move on here. So what is financial elder abuse? This occurs when a senior's money or property is used illegally or without permission. It is the most common form of elder abuse, and it often starts after a health crisis. It's difficult to identify and recognize. Sometimes you don't even know that it's been happening for years. The senior may have even given permission for these things, but only because the person who's abusing them manipulated, pressured, forced, or tricked them into it. And this doesn't just happen to persons living with dementia. This is like elder abuse in general. So some examples are that the person would lend or give away money, selling. So what you might see is a person sells or moves away from their home, and this is an unexpected thing. They change their will or their power of attorney. They might sign legal or financial documents that they don't understand because they're pressured or coerced to do that. They end up working for little or no money, or they buy things they don't want or need, or they're providing food or shelter to others without being paid. So just being generally taken advantage of. Now, typically, abusers are close to the victim. So most often someone is a spouse, son, daughter, relative, friend, neighbor, or caregiver, which is the sad part. And they're always basically taking advantage and doing what's in their best interest. And they may try to manipulate them into the victim into thinking they're the ones causing the problem. So again, if you see any of these signs, like I highly encourage you to talk to Adult Protection Program. And that's sort of where we would refer you if you were having issues with, like, if you thought another person was taking advantage of the person you're caring for or supporting as another family member, that's where we would direct you. Now, to help reduce the likelihood of this happening, make sure that financial and personal information is kept safe, not just lying around where anybody can access it. Getting legal advice before signing any documents. So just making sure, if you know someone signing something, ask them, like, have you checked? Have you had somebody review that or look at that for you? Keeping a record of money you give away or loan, or the person gives away or loans. Appointing a trusted person as a power of attorney. So setting up a power of attorney, having a joint bank account, and someone to review contracts before signing. And then this one here, you know, I kind of was like, well, it sort of fits and it doesn't. It says, if you're experiencing abuse, ask for help. But the problem is most often people don't realize that that's what's happening. They don't feel that way because the person abusing them tries to make it feel like everything's okay. So So again, you might be the one who's identifying that it's happening between two other people. And what we would say is you can call a trusted person, the police, or again, adult protection would be one of the places to go. Now, in terms of, oh yeah, these menus, decreasing risk strategies, again, keeping documents locked away, but also keeping multiple copies in different locations. Ensuring that someone has access to important information for when the person living with dementia is no longer capable of managing finances. So who knows what the plan is for when that day comes? Make sure more than one person knows. And again, keeping documents together in a binder is good, and then have a couple of copies of the binder in secure locations at different places. Scams are the #1 crime against seniors in Canada. Again, seniors are more likely to trust. They're more likely to be home during the day to answer the phone or the door. They are less likely to have friends and family around. And there's a number of different kinds of scams. You can find tons of lists of them online of the common and new scams that are coming out. But identity theft, credit card fraud, and online scams are the most common. Have you heard of the grandparents scam?
Yeah, I got a call about a month ago or two.
You did?
Did you, really?
Yeah,
So
And
some,
did they say this is like your?
yeah, they said something like grandma, and I said, who was this? And I said, don't you know your oldest grandson? I said, and I caught on right away, I said, no, I'm not even the grandmother. And what about your nephew? Like, he kept going. I said,
wow.
no, he's not good, I don't remember him.
So the grandparents scam, somebody in this room had a call recently, just for those of you online. And what happens is a person will call and they'll act as though they're one of the grandchildren. And they'll say something terrible has happened or they need something and don't tell mom, you know, I don't want her to know, but I just need $500, you know. And it gets more people than you would think. So, and I'll tell you why. So here's some ways that you can reduce the risk of this happening. If someone calls you, so this is an example, Alex's phone rings and the caller looks unfamiliar, but it has a 902 area code. And the person says, hey, grandpa, do you know which one of your grandchildren this is? And so you might not really think much of it and you'd be like, oh, is this Cody? And the guy's like, okay, so I know who I have to say I am. So instead of that, we say, no, I don't. Tell me who's calling. And the caller says, yes, this is Cody. I'm calling because I'm in trouble and I need help. So what happens sometimes is that seniors have gotten caught sending thousands of dollars doing this. Let's say you said, oh, is this Cody? But then you realize, oh, I made a mistake. I gave him the name. You can ask a question that only Cody would know the answer to. You can hang up and call Cody back on the number you have for him and see what's going on. Those are some strategies. Now, it's more difficult for a person living with dementia, but if you happen to be in the room with someone, you can listen into what's happening and make sure that they're taking the steps that they need to. And the reason this is so hard now, have you heard about the AI?
Yes, my
Yeah.
friend got a call from his like they said it was his grandson, it was his exact voice.
I know.
And what he says, what he always says, oh, hi, Poppy, you know, and all that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't him.
No, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah, it's
It-
the tip of the iceberg on that too.
Yeah.
what did they say? It takes 30 seconds of hearing your voice for AI to replicate your voice exactly and make calls that sound like they're coming from you. So sometimes what's happening is people are getting called from people that actually sound like their family member and sound exactly, and they might even spoof the caller ID and the number. So it's getting even trickier to identify these things. So just be aware that that technology is active and it's possible. There was a woman in Saskatchewan apparently who had the AI version of this scam happen as well.
You know, it happened to my father, that he said,
Mhm.
like, this is Jesse Grampy. And and my father's like, that's my sister's son. And dad thought, sounds more like Jav and my son. And so then he kind of caught on and he was like, oh, I've been in an accident. And dad's like,
Right.
he caught on quick, thank
Yeah.
gosh. But
I'm
I think, thank God
surprised.
my mother didn't answer the
Yeah.
phone.
Right.
Right?
So there's only 9 people in the room and there's 2 in here already who've had calls and have had personal experience with this scam. So it's definitely quite widespread. Yeah,
Scary.
it is. Scammers are going to attempt to learn your PIN number, your social insurance number, or your bank number. So you'll see that, like you'll get stuff from, it'll say, your CRA information needs to be updated. You get a text to your phone, and they'll be looking to fish for this kind of information. So any organization or any text or email that's asking for any of those, automatically it's a scam. CRA will never ask you through a text what your social insurance number is. They already know. So those things need to never give out your personal or financial information on the phone or online unless you're very sure of who it is. Also, shredding old bills, keeping personal documents secure, so birth certificate, SIN number, passport, and limiting the computer usage of the person living with dementia to the time of day when they are most aware is a strategy that you can use. Or making it a group activity, so doing some of it together. Not that you're trying to spy on them, but just in a supportive way, and making online life a part of your daily life. So discussing what activities they enjoyed online today. So so that you might hear, they might say, oh, I went to this really cool site and it was doing this and all I had to do was X, Y, Z. And then you're like, oh, okay, let's go check out what that is. So just asking some questions about what they're doing online. Again, not in a suspicious way, but just in an information sharing way, can be helpful. You can also install some browser add-ons that block unsafe and unsecure websites. Okay. You can install and run antivirus software regularly. You can educate the person living with dementia about fraud and cybersecurity. So a person living with dementia in the early stages is still capable of learning things. You can still tell them, watch out for this, or you can even put a note beside their computer that says, don't click on any links, or, you know, some of the instructions you might give them. And don't open any attachments or click on links from unknown senders. Don't visit any suspiciously named sites. And reduce the amount of personal data you have on social media profiles. If you don't know how to do it, find somebody who can show you how to change your security settings in Facebook and make as much information just available to friends and friends of friends and not public. You'd be amazed what you can find out about people because they don't know how to change their settings. So have somebody help you do that. That will, again, reduce incidents of scams. It's really hard to get accountability on the scams and things that are happening. However, you can call the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center. Get as many details as you can about what the situation is. If the scam is claiming to be CRA, I would hang up right away and call CRA. You can register your phone on Canada's Do Not Call list, but it's only moderately effective through. And as well, again, report financial elder abuse to adult protection. Okay, are there any questions about recognizing financial elder abuse, risk reduction, frauds, and scams? Thing, but it's not always like a financial impact that people are experiencing. Sometimes it's more about identity and people's details, and then that's when you see what are the cloned Facebook profiles and other things that are being done in a person's name. I'll just quickly check the chat.
One of the things I've noticed from the tax issue, you get an email and it says they're from Revenue Canada, but CRA. You know, and they're getting better. They realize that Revenue Canada is no longer used, that CRA is what's used now.
Right.
And the scams are getting better and more sophisticated.
They are getting more sophisticated. So we're going to talk next about supports to continue living at home. And again, we have a lot of different education sessions. So today we're only focusing on the financial aspects of these elements. So we're not going to get right into what the program requirements are and those kinds of things. We're just going to look at the finances related to each of these. So some of the community support services that you can use in the home include prepared meals, can really take the burden off the caregiver in terms of preparing a lot of meals, or sometimes it can be good if the person living with dementia is on their own to have these prepared meals brought in for them so that there's not a safety issue with using the stove as things progress and those kinds of things. So prepared meals I highly recommend. You need to look at driving cessation at some point in time. At some point in time, we will all retire from driving. And you need to make a plan for that. And especially if you live in a rural area. So there's a lot of alternate transportation available now. Has everybody heard about the $2 bus? there, you have to think about what that's going to cost and what you might need. There's home care, both provincial as well as private, that's available. We provide a lot of different supports, which are mostly free, except for our conference, just because we recoup costs. Hospice PEI, CLIA is a great resource, community legal information. There's also the seniors navigator and the patient navigators on the island that are good at helping you to navigate the system. And 211 can help navigate services also. So let's look at some of the costs. Meals on Wheels, and again, we had a lovely, completely wonderful summer student help do a lot of the background for this module this summer, Olivia, and all of this information is current as of August, is what I'm going to say. So some of these things change from year to year. So if you're watching this in the future, please look up, tax amounts can change and those kinds of things. So consider this a general guide. Most meals cost around $4 each, and there's typically a minimum commitment. Might be something like 5 to 10 meals. I'm not sure. It's probably different. There are now meal programs in each of the towns or cities that are on this this slide, and there might be different eligibility requirements. So you'd have to inquire with Meals on Wheels in your area. But again, a great service. It takes a lot of work to prepare healthy meals. You've got to cook, you got to prep, you got to cook, you got to clean. And so just that, hour and a half a day can be a nice break for a caregiver to say, you know what, somebody else can cook tonight. Transportation, Pat and the Elephant, it has no boundaries. It's across PEI. Within Charlottetown, it's a $13 one-way trip. That includes Stratford. And then it's $2 a kilometer outside Charlottetown. They only cash, check, or credit. And they do have 11 trips for the price of 10. So that is one option. That's a wheelchair transportation rate, however. Prince County has its own transportation system called Transportation West. And the prices are determined by travel between communities. So a round trip Tignish to Alberton is $22, 11 each way. And then the rates will increase outside of West Prince, essentially. I'm told, and I couldn't find any updated information when I looked, that there's going to be a Kings County transportation service being opened by Home Care. So if you happen to be out that way, there is something coming. I just don't know if it's active yet. Now, there's also the city busing as well if you're in Charlottetown. Does Somerset have a city bus?
Yeah, but the T3, the Toonie buses.
The Toonie bus?
It travels to Summerside, stops at various points throughout Summerside,
Okay,
continues west.
so the T3, that's its official name?
Yeah, tries,
Okay.
owns it, so it's T3.
Wonderful.
Mhm.
And have you folks used that in your walking group?
We're planning to do a little bus trip so that we get a broader
Yes,
expanse of territory walking.
love it. Okay. We have a wonderful walking group here in Charlottetown that tends to, they've probably seen everything in Charlottetown twice now, at least. So they go further afield. So this would be a great way to get out of town. Home care services can be really helpful as well. If you qualify for services through the provincial home-based care program, the services are free. They provide the whole range that you see on the screen. I don't need to list them all off, but these can support you to stay at home longer, to maintain health, to maintain well-being, to take a load off the caregiver as needed. They are also, they do the assessments for long-term care, as well as the day programs. Day programs are lovely, both in terms of having respite for the caregiver, but also because they provide activities and connection for the person living with dementia. So ways to stay engaged and have relationships. And we used to run a day program here many years ago, but now it's a Brecken House. So the province in this area, the province runs the day programs now. And I listed all of these in here for you. So that's again, just a reference. If you're looking for an ADP across the province, that information will be in here. Now, private home care services, there's a wide range in terms of how much you'll pay. If you're hiring privately, you'll probably pay less, but you're not going to have the same reliability. So if you have somebody if you hire Bayshore and their person can't come, they will send another person. So you have that benefit. Prices range between $25 and $30 an hour, and that could be anything from doing respite care and engagement work to doing nursing work and RCW support as well. If you're hiring privately, which we don't discourage you from doing, there might be an RCW or a nurse living next door that's retired and they want to do this kind of work. We just recommend that you interview everybody, you do background check on them, so do your references, and ask them to get a criminal record check. And then you kind of know a little bit about them, and if you want them in your home, and if you feel like leaving them with your person. And you can ask them if they have certifications too, because some of the RNs and RCWs who might do this might have specialized dementia care skills. So again, there's benefits and drawbacks to going private versus a company here. Now I want to look at some of the, and this is where Nelson's hopefully going to come in. We're starting to, maybe not quite yet, almost to tax credits. Some of the financial supports to help you live at home, there's a number of different programs. We're going to go through each of them fairly quickly, but again, the information is here for you, okay? So you don't need to memorize it. There's the PEI home renovation program. You're eligible if the total household income is under 50,000. It assists with major structural renovations. And it's a maximum of $12,000 to improve the building's structure, heating system, plumbing, electrical, or to increase safety in the home. Renovations to increase accessibility for those who have applied and have a permanent disability, they can receive more, up to $16,000. The home repair and safe at home programs. So these are two additional programs, maximum of $4,000 to repair roofs, windows, and siding. It's available to applicants 60 years of age or older. And the seniors safe at home program is, you get automatic consideration if you applied to the PEI home renovation program and you are 60 plus. And again, it's modifications to make the home more accessible so the senior can stay there. Cost of renovations up to $10,000. So that can include all kinds of things, whether it's a ramp to improve safety for someone who has a walker or who might be in a wheelchair. It could be things around, like maybe you want to put a bedroom in on the main floor. Like, again, I can't tell you everything that's going to qualify, but just thinking about safety, that's kind of what you'd be looking at.
That still goes by your salary.
I think so. Most of them do have maximum. Yeah. There's also heat pump rebate at point of sale that you can look into. You would reduce the heat pump's price by $1,200. There are free heat pump programs. I'm sure everyone's heard of them now, but you have to have a household income less than 75,000. Your home has to be assessed at 300,000 or less. And there are also home insulation rebates to help with efficiency. And rebates are available to everyone, but there's higher rebates if you have an income of less than 35,000 or 35 or less. There are, in addition, federal programs to remain at home, like the Federal Home Accessibility Tax Credit and the Multi-Generational Renovation Tax Credit, Multi-Generational Home Renovation Tax Credit. These are non-refundable tax credits for home improvements to increase a person's mobility within the house, lessen the risk of danger, or make the house more accessible. You're eligible for a tax credit of up to $3,000 to recover some of the taxes paid to make the modifications to increase accessibility. Now, it's either the senior or the family member who can claim the amount, and you can claim both construction and renovation expenses as medical expenses and under this, so you can claim them twice. Multi-generational home credit, again, this is for remodeling a home to create like an in-law suite would be an example, to create a secondary unit. For purchases made after December 31st of 22, it can be claimed for 2023, and then again, subsequent tax years. So you do have a grace period where you can go backwards. Up to $7,500 in tax savings is possible through this program. And equipment, there's a lot of different equipment, and all these things have costs. So it's just, these are some of the things to think about when you're doing your planning. And then Red Cross would have a health equipment loan program. So accessing some of these things just to reduce your costs can be helpful. If you need a hospital bed, you can get one there as well. Some of the hospitals have an equipment loan program and some don't. And then there's also the accessibility and social assistance programs that help support equipment through the government of PEI. Some devices that you might consider in the future, in particular, if you want to stay at home late into the disease, are GPS or tracking or devices, or even like a door alarm. So in particular, if the person's day and night changes, if they like to be up at night a lot and you're sleeping and you're worried about them, you can put alarms on the door so that you know they leave and the alarm is right beside your bed. Or you, let's say they like to go walking and that's great, but you're worried that maybe one day they might become lost. If you have a GPS technology, then you can locate them if they don't arrive back on time. You know, some of these things to think about. Assistive devices like even clocks that are bigger with big face. And I think if you touch it, well, it did this earlier when I didn't want it to do this. Because I picked it up and it talked to me.
Where do you get them?
There's a couple of the pharmacies that have it. We have it on an assistive.
2:01
Now,
PM,
now it
Wednesday,
talks.
February 28th.
So we can get you that sheet and it'll show you there's some different pharmacies that carry it. But yeah, you can just press it and it'll read the time. This slide, again, I'm not going to go through it, but if you happen to be a veteran or if the person living with dementia is a veteran, there are a number of different programs that are separate to support them, including the Veterans Independence Program, Caregiver Recognition, and a couple of other programs for caregivers as well. In terms of medications, all seniors 65 plus are covered by the Seniors Drug Program. If the drug is on the provincial formulary, that's the tricky part. The copay is $15.94 per prescription.
Or less.
Or less?
Okay.
Okay. I'll add that in later.
Couldn't be 5, is it?
Can it?
As low as 5.
It's as low as 5,
If it's
I'm
like
told.
Blood pressure or something
Yep.
that's good for your,
Okay.
gonna help you live or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. What we have available here to treat Alzheimer's are donezepam, rivastigmine, and Reminil or galantamine, and those are covered by PEI Pharmacare. Aricept is the one that they use mostly, so donezepam, that's the generic name, and it does not need authorization. But let's say Aricept sometimes can cause side effects like gastrointestinal and other things. So if that's the case, then you might want to try Exelon or Reminil. But in order to do that, you need to submit the prescriptions to Pharmacare for special authorization. So it's not that it won't be covered, it's that you need the authorization. You need to have an intolerance to donezepam, and you need to have an MMSE that's been completed within the last 6 months. Everyone know what the MMSE is? Mini state mental exam. It's one of the basic cognitive screeners that they do in diagnosing. And you have to have a score between 10 and 30. 30 is the best that you can get. So, and any, like a doctor can do that, or a nurse practitioner can do an MMSE as well. Drugs that are currently not approved and covered here in PEI include Ebixa or Memantine, which is not listed, and Exelon or rivastigmine, but only in the patch form. So sorry if that's a little bit confusing. The oral form is covered, but not the patch form. Now, the patch form is really useful if you happen to be somebody like me who's very intolerant to medications, and they make me nauseous, pretty much every medication. People with dementia who have that affliction, the patches actually can work well, but they're not covered. Okay, so there's a number of different resources here. I think there's multiple slides of community resources. Do we have questions online about that section? All right, folks, we're going to get moving again. Thanks for your patience. Sometimes you just need to get up and move around. Okay. All right, we're going to talk now about preparing taxes, and Nelson Hagerman's here to answer all your tax questions, because I'm definitely no
Right.
expert. Nelson, what's your title?
I'm CPA and chartered accountant.
Yeah.
What we're going to talk about today is claiming medical expenses, claiming disability, the caregiver tax credits, as well as free tax clinics. Some of the common medical expenses, let me just move this. Medical expenses include claims around care, construction and renovation, equipment, travel and moving expenses, only for the portion of expenses not covered by other subsidies or by insurance, private insurance. And there is a comprehensive list of several hundred claimable medical expenses that you can look at on the CRA website. So we might not know if a particular thing is claimable, but there's an easy way to find out. And the link is in the presentation. Care at home. So you can claim any money that you pay for an attendant to come in to do personal or health care that the person living with dementia cannot do for themselves. It can be a private individual, but not a spouse. It can be another family member. Am I right? Yeah. Or it can be a private company. So you could pay a grandchild to come in and stay with the person living with dementia and care for them and help out, but just not the spouse.
Okay,
Okay, so we got who you can pay, then in care, long-term care homes. The nursing care is the basically the part you can claim if it's a nursing home. You can't claim everything, the food, accommodation. And you get a report from the nursing home as to what's eligible for deduction.
Yes, we'll go over that some as well. And then in community care homes, you can claim salaries for the employees, for preparing food, housekeeping and laundry, as well as healthcare professionals and activities programmers. But they will give you a statement, and there's a sheet that'll kind of show you what that looks like. So if you are providing care at home, make sure you keep all your receipts and follow the CRA guidelines around it. Again, keep every receipt, keep more than you necessarily think you should, because a good accountant is going to be able to tell you what you can claim, what you can't, and sometimes there's things that you don't think about. Facilities will provide you again with an itemized receipt. Any subsidies received will reduce these fees, and those will be included on the receipt breakdown. So subsidies that you receive might affect the medical expense claim, but that should all be provided to you. It'll look something like this. This is just an example. It'll show you what the total expense is, the non-eligible expenses, and the eligible. So this is if your person is living in care in a facility. Now, again, this is just another example of what that looks like. And it'll show, this one has the subsidies on it. It'll show the subsidies and it'll do the math here. Oh, sorry. And it'll tell you what your eligible expenses are after subsidies. In terms of construction and renovation, there have been some, this includes changes to the home to improve accessibility and mobility. And that can include things like driveway access, outdoor, indoor ramps, lowering countertops if needed, or installing grab bars and other safety devices. And that can be up to, I would say that's supposed to be 2,000 to 3,000 and not 20,000 to 3,000, and that's a typo. And who can claim this? The homeowner over age 65 or eligible for the disability tax credit or supporting relatives. So what that means is if you're under age 65, but you are eligible for the disability tax credit, you would qualify. You can claim these expenses under both medical as well as the home accessibility tax credit. Medical equipment that you can claim, again, we wanted to put in some examples, but there's a full list. Some of the things that are not covered might be more interesting. Things like BP monitors, liquid meal replacement, over-the-counter meds, and personal response systems like Medic Alert or Lifeline, etc. Those things are not covered. Travel and moving can be claimed as well if you have to travel to services that are not available near your home. So you can, if you have to travel 40 kilometers or more one way to access a service, you can claim that travel as a medical expense. If your travel is 80 kilometers or more, book a hotel room. No, it means that you'll be able to deduct your accommodation, food, and parking as a medical expense. If you are moving to housing that is more accessible, functional, or mobile, so if you need to move for the person to improve those things in their life, it does depend on the degree of physical impairment and other condition, but you can claim moving expenses. And that can be claimed by the person moving, and there is a maximum dollar amount. I'm not sure what that is. All right, because this stuff is a little bit dense, are there any questions about claiming medical expenses? We'll go through these one at a time and do some rapid questions. So we're talking, it's good timing, Nelson, because I was about to talk about the disability tax credit. There's one more question online about depends, and I don't know if you know about if depends are covered under a medical expense or not.
I have a client that she looks after her husband, and I put everything in.
So in case you didn't hear it, Nelson claims everything related to care. And we do believe it's on the list, but there is a whole list on the CRA website of all the items that you can claim. And in terms of the, Laura, I think your question is about, does the caregiver need to live in the same residence? Are you talking about the disability credit? Or are you talking about, yes, okay, we're gonna go through this now. So if I haven't answered your question at the end of the disability slides, we'll circle back to that about the caregiver living in the residence. Okay, so to claim disability, this is a non-refundable tax credit. It reduces the amount of income tax that is paid. You must have a diagnosis to be eligible. If you're applying for dementia reasons to disability, you must have a confirmed diagnosis, and the credit can be transferred to a caregiver. It is a savings of around 2,100 of taxes per year. So how you do that? You go get a diagnosis. You apply online through CRA. You can do it by online, phone, or by paper. The medical practitioner completes their section of the application, which is the paper Nelson has here, and then CRA will review for approval. After approval, you do not need to reapply every year. CRA will notify you if you ever have to do a reapply, and it can be applied 10 years retroactively. So let's say you've been caring for someone for 5 years, but you didn't know about this. You can go backwards up to 10 years. Yeah, it is, yes. So there's links in the presentation to access this as well. And Laura, can you just pop a question in there if that didn't answer your question? And Bronwyn will let me know if you do. The Registered Disability Savings Plan is another option. It's a long-term savings investment account. This is particularly applicable if you are 59 years old or younger. So if it's a person with young onset dementia, they can qualify for the disability tax credit as well. It's just a little bit different. The contributions are not tax deductible. They can be made by beneficiary, family, friends, neighbors, or organizations. They are matched or exceeded by 1 to 3 times by the federal government. Payments to the beneficiary may be tax-free and can start at the age of 60. So this isn't, it's almost like an RESP, but it's saving money in advance for somebody who's having a disability under the age of 59. Okay, we're going to talk now about caregiver tax credits, including the caregiver, Canada caregiver amount, PEI caregiver amount for an eligible dependent, and the spouse and common law amount. The federal Canada caregiver amount is a non-refundable tax credit, and it reduces the amount of income tax that you have to pay. You can claim up to 75.25 as of last year. For caregivers of a dependent with a mental incapacity, must be dependent for regular, consistent support and provision of basic necessities like food, shelter, and clothing. However, the dependent does not have to live with the caregiver. So that might have been your question, Laura. It may require a statement from a medical practitioner, so you might be asked to produce that. but you could be providing regular care to somebody that you're not living with, and you can claim them. The federal caregiver amount, the amount claimed depends on the relationship itself, the caregiver's financial circumstances, the net income of the person living with dementia, and receipt of other credits being claimed for the dependent. And the line items are in here for you as well. And then there's the PEI caregiver amount. It's a non-refundable tax credit, and again, reduces the income you have to pay up to 2,446 per dependent. It can be split with another caregiver if there are, let's say, siblings caring for a parent together. It can, I clicked things. There we go. Eligibility. It does the relationship of the dependent to the caregiver, the income level and age of the dependent. So 65 years of old or more must live in the same household for the PEI credit, but no diagnosis of dementia is required. Now, let's see, I'm going to pause here because these two credits, the federal caregiver and the PEI caregiver, I know that you probably have some questions. So we'll start with the federal. Anybody online have questions or in the room?
Yes, there's a question.
Okay, I'm just going to mute and we'll take the question on the other computer so Nelson can answer.
So the question is, my mom has the disability tax credit, but if she doesn't need it, I believe I can claim part of it as I've moved provinces to live with her and care for her. Just wondering if that's correct and how I could go about claiming it.
You can claim all of it,
She can claim all of it if her mom doesn't claim it.
yes.
Does that answer your
She's a
question?
caregiver living with her, right?
Yes,
Yeah. That's the plan.
for the disability tax credit.
Disability, right, and plus the caregiver tax credit.
Yeah, another question online. I am a caregiver for my brother who is blind. Can I also claim for my husband who has dementia?
Yes.
Yes,
You can claim twice,
the credit
twice.
per dependent, yeah.
Okay,
The question for those online was, for the retroactive 10 years, does it require a diagnosis? And the answer is yes.
all right, let's look at amount for an eligible dependent. Just want to check time. Okay. You can, this is another non-refundable tax credit. It cannot be shared with another caregiver, and it cannot be claimed if the person living with dementia is your spouse. So there's a different benefit that we'll look at next. The eligibility conditions include the relationship of the dependent to the caregiver, the income level and age of the dependent. You must live in the same household, but no dementia, diagnosis of dementia is required to claim somebody as a dependent. Now, if it is a spouse, you would claim this, I think got some ghosts in the machine today. You would claim the spouse or a common law. Again, same thing, cannot be shared with another caregiver. The dependent must be spouse or common law, so 1+ years living in the same residence. It looks at income level, but again, no diagnosis of dementia is required. So if you're providing care and support, you can claim individuals as a dependent. So there's a table in here for you to help out with some quick information about each of these amounts, where you find them on the tax return, and some of the basic information about it. So this is just something that you can look back at later on. All right, now free tax clinics. The Community Volunteer Income Tax Program is it's hosted by community organizations across Canada. They can connect you with local free tax clinics. It's eligible for seniors with modest income and a simple tax solution. So as long as it's not too complex, there are free options for having your taxes done. If things are very complex, a lot of assets, a lot of different things, it's probably better to work with an accountant or they can help you to maximize your benefit. Any last questions about claiming medical expenses, construction, renovation, travel, moving, disability, federal caregiver amounts, PEI caregiver amounts?
So you're saying if you're a spouse and you're looking after your husband, you have to be kind of like separated, is that?
Nope.
No.
No.
I'll mute and let Nelson take that. So the question is, it's about claiming your spouse as a dependent and what the stipulations are. So I'll let
Claiming them
Nelson
as a
answer.
dependent.
Well, yeah, they don't have any income.
Oh, if they don't have any income.
But with the disability tax credit, if they can't use the disability tax credit, you can use it.
Okay,
But I mean, if they have sufficient income, they can use that.
Yeah.
And you can use a caregiver
But you can claim them as a dependent as well, right?
based on their income.
So those are known quantities that can be
Hmm.
accessed.
I have a question actually about the tax credit. Are all of them retroactive?
So
The question is, are all of the tax credits retroactive?
The disability
So just disability, okay.
the caregiver one
and
was
the
too.
caregivers, so yeah.
Caregivers.
So the disability and the caregiver amounts are retroactive.
Yeah.
Just a question, talking earlier about paying somebody to look after, say, my spouse, right? Is there a certain amount that's covered per hour, or does it go just as a yearly amount?
I don't know if there's any limit or not. Yes, but it's sort of part of the expense, but honestly, I don't know if there's a limit in what you can claim, but that would be in the,
A maximum benefit kind of thing for medical
Well, just if
expenses?
you're paying somebody to look after your wife, let's say, and up to $20 an hour, etc. Kind of.
I think that it would be a cumulative medical. So it
part
would,
of the
it would
medical
be,
expenses,
yeah.
but I've never seen a limit in terms
I
of what
just
you can
wondered
claim.
how you would determine it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would have to be reasonable for one thing, like
Yeah.
$100 an hour or something like
$100 an hour.
that wouldn't work.
the helpful resources. So there are going to be links that take you through to all of the different benefits that we talked about, from disability to the RDSP, how to access the caregiver amounts. The other person that I meant to thank, and I'll thank him at the end too, is Blair Corkum. He has volunteered a lot of his time and information to help us put this together. And so I just wanted to thank him. He has a lot of great resources on his website. So I've put quite a few links into his resources here as well. The next section that we're talking about, we have 2 more sections, and I think we're going to actually get through it in time, which I'm surprised about because it's a lot of info. But we're going to talk about when a move is necessary. We're going to look at seniors housing, community care, long-term care, and alternate level of care hospital stays. And then last, we're going to look at advanced care planning, healthcare directives, and power of attorney. And obviously, we're only doing an introduction and talking about some of the basic principles here. We could do a half day or more on some of these subjects. So again, please let us know if you have questions. I'll stop again after this next section and at the end. So the seniors housing program, let's say you have a person living with dementia, they're still functioning very well. Maybe they live in the country and you want to bring them into the city. Or, maybe they just don't want to live quite so independently in a home in the city. You want to move to something that's a little more cohabitative. You would look for seniors housing, and you can apply for a unit close to home, so they're in the same neighborhood. You can, eligibility is essentially 60 plus, or if the person is living with a disability, it's 55 plus. The assessment that is done, so tenants are selected based on need, income, assets, health, age, and current housing conditions are all considered. The monthly rent is 25% of the income, and there's a number of things that are not included, like phone and cable and internet and electricity, but the rent itself is 25%. Again, the link is there if you're interested in seniors housing. Community care facilities are for individuals who need basic support with activities of day-to-day living. So this is someone who isn't as independent, who might need help with meals, bathing, medications, and laundry. But similar to renting, the residents are the ones who are responsible for paying room and board. Community care homes are not subsidized. However, there's a caveat there, but in general, they are not subsidized. You can get some support from social assistance, However, they will take into account your assets when determining availability for subsidy. So we're going to talk about long-term care next. Long-term care does not take into account your assets, only your income. But community care, you're allowed to keep up to $100,000 worth of assets, but they will expect you to sell off assets over and above that to pay for your care before you would be eligible for help from social assistance.
What do they classify as assets? Is what you have in the bank?
No, it could be your home.
Okay.
The question was what qualifies as an asset? So yes, it could be bank accounts and other financial assets, but it could also be property as well. Now, the maximum monthly coverage that you can get from social assistance for a community care home is around, well, last year it was $27,23.81 to cover your monthly rent and then $140 of allowance. So it's important to note that the current rent for some of these homes might be higher than the subsidy amount. So even if you qualify for subsidy, there still will be an amount owing that you'll need assets to support. Now, long-term care is an option for individuals who are requiring a higher level of care with nursing, and access to long-term care is determined by Health PEI through the home care program, through an assessment that is done that determines the level and type of need that the person has in terms of their care. Individuals will only be added to the wait list once an assessment is completed, and people have kind of made a choice and consent to moving into long-term care. Now, you can be offered a bed and refuse a bed in long-term care, but it bumps you to the bottom of the list generally. Obviously, things are prioritized based on need. So if there was a crisis placement, you would then be readjusted, but it can be a bit of a wait. Again, we talk a lot about community care and long-term care in our Options for Care education program, which is about 5 hours of talking about all of the ins and outs of those programs. We're just really focusing on finances today. So the long-term care subsidization program is administered by Health PEI, and it's regulated by the Long-Term Care Subsidization Act. You need to apply to the program and be financially assessed. Eligibility is determined by the applicant's net income. So right now, we're just talking about a single person, not a married person, but a single person who's applying, their net income, or line 23,600 on their notice of assessment. The subsidy pays the monthly difference between the individual's assessed income and the accommodation rate approved. And I'm going to show you an example that makes it easy. And the accommodation rate is different, by the way, between a public and a private long-term care home. Only those whose income is, that should be less than 42,000 will not currently receive any benefit. No, sorry, those whose income is greater than 42,000 will not receive any benefit. You have to be essentially under that amount. I was right. Assets are not taken into account when determining subsidy and qualifications for subsidy, only net income. Income from all sources is considered though. So your CPP, OAS, GIS, pensions, interest, dividends, all of these things are considered, but not assets like homes and those kinds of things, or like what you have in a savings account. The cost to stay in a government long-term care home is around $105 a day, or about $40,000 a year. Individuals are only required to pay for their room and board as the province covers medical and nursing care expenses. But we will go over what some additional expenses look like. Here's an example. So Mrs. Smith's income last year was $24,000. She's obligated to make monthly payments of essentially her income divided by 12, which is $2,000 a month. The government of PEI subsidy would cover the remaining balance for those parts of care. Now, private long-term care homes have their own rates for self-paying clients, but they do have to provide care to any individual approved for subsidy without additional charges unless the family is requesting additional services. So they provide the government rate for subsidized folks, Additional long-term care costs, and this is probably not an exhaustive list, that are not covered include things like prescription drugs, audio, dental, vision services, continuous oxygen therapy, physio, private duty nursing, and other healthcare providers or podiatry services. So if you ask for more care, you might end up paying for those services. Now, there are considerations for couples. And this is where, you know, hopefully Nelson can help me out here if you have any complex questions. If a person moving into long-term care is married, they can apply for long-term care subsidization as a couple or as an individual. It is a one-time final decision. So what you decide at the beginning, that's what you're stuck with. So you have to make the decision very carefully. If you are applying as a couple, the income for both partners is combined and then divided in half to determine the income. If you're applying as an individual, only the income of a partner who is applying for long-term care is considered. Income amounts are reassessed annually based on the tax return of that year. So something to think about. Let's say the woman makes 100,000 a year and the man makes 40,000 a year, and the woman is going into care. Should she claim it as an individual, or should they split it and try to get a reduced amount to qualify for subsidy? Let's look at some of those when it might make sense and when it might not. So you have to consider any income which may impact the current or the future year's subsidies. So if there's a person remaining in the community, are they going to continue having an income that will be assessed that might, maybe they start making a bunch of money in the next 5 to 10 years and it bumps them out of being able to have the subsidy because they applied as a couple. You know, there's different considerations there. Also, you have to consider the cost for the remaining partner at home. Obviously, you want to make sure that the partner at home can maintain the costs of the home and has enough money to live. Factors that can impact income and long-term care subsidy received include RSP withdrawals, which need to start happening at age 71, pension splitting, which may increase or decrease income depending on how it's done. And that's primarily, you're talking about work pensions, not your CPP. You have to carefully plan the timing of capital gains. And this is why we need people like Nelson. There are other things to consider, like the guaranteed income supplement and the use of involuntary separation. So couples who are receiving this benefit can use involuntary separation to increase the amount that they are receiving through the supplement. But this is not a separation for tax or legal purposes. It's only around the GIS. So these are monthly payment. Low-income seniors can receive a top up to their OAS through this benefit. And you may need to apply for the supplement, and you can receive the first payment from the month after you turn 65. The amount is determined by marital status, and involuntary separation occurs when a couple needs to live apart for reasons beyond their control. So if the person has to go into care, obviously that's a reason beyond their control. Some couples may decide to split up to 50% of one spouse's pension income and share with the other spouse. But splitting a pension can decrease the pension that the partner going into care receives if they were originally the higher income spouse. Now they can access more subsidy because their income is lower and they save money paying for long-term care. So as I said a few slides ago, it might look like it makes sense, but you have to look at all the considerations before and do the calculations with someone who knows before you make a decision. So don't rush that decision. Have somebody help you to assess the situation, to consider, is it better to apply as an individual in the long run? Is it better to apply as a couple? And think about the scenarios that might happen that would influence that. All right, we're almost there. So alternate level of care, this is the term for an individual who has been had a stay in hospital. They are medically well enough to be discharged, but they cannot be safely discharged home. So they end up waiting in hospital for a long-term care bed. Unfortunately, it can be for quite some time. After the person is medically well, or yes, medically well, they don't need to be there anymore. They are obligated to pay up to $105 a day for room and board in the hospital. Those individuals can apply for financial assistance. They have the same eligibility requirements in terms of applying for subsidy to long-term care. And to do that, you just notify the hospital discharge coordinator or social work to get help applying for long-term care subsidization if the person is in the hospital. All right, any questions about seniors housing, community care, long-term care, or ALC? So we're going to just look quickly again at capacity, advanced care planning and healthcare directives, power of attorney. And then lastly, there's some information in there about prepaid funerals for anybody who's interested in going that route. So a person is said, again, to have capacity when they understand all the information relevant to the decisions they are making and when they understand the consequences of their actions. There is some information here for you about capacity assessment, if you need that. Now, advanced care planning. Preparing important documents and plan, there's a number of guides. There might even be some, there's an advanced care planning workbook here that you can get from the province as well. You can download it. And it really helps individuals to be able to express their values, beliefs, wishes clearly and effectively. And it's recommended to review and update this after every major life change. So if there's a relocation, a divorce, a death in the family, you can, and then we're going to talk, there's no cost to prepare this, by the way, unlike a will, you can fill this out. There's a basic workbook that Health PEI has. CLIA might have an additional resource around that as well. I think they do. Yeah, I see it on my table here. Now, advanced directives, these are more about healthcare decisions. So the healthcare directive outlines a person's wishes for their future healthcare and declares a proxy or substitute decision maker. So your power of attorney for finances does not make healthcare decisions. You need a separate person to do that for you. The proxy or the substitute decision maker, they can be the same person. Sorry, I'll just stop there. It is not necessarily the same person, but it can be. They make decisions on behalf of the person if the person cannot make them themselves. And again, this person can't make financial decisions. So that's kind of the way that works. The power of attorney, you would give permission for this attorney to manage your financial affairs and your legal affairs and allow them to make decisions on your behalf. But again, the POA can't decide how you are cared for. So this is also important. A POA can only be used while you are still living. When you pass, a POA ends and the executor of your will and testament takes over these affairs. So POA is for when you're alive. An enduring POA is a specific clause that you have to have in your power of attorney document that says that the POA is still appointed in the event that you become incapacitated or incompetent. If there is no POA or enduring clause, you consult legal services. The court will appoint a substitute decision maker on your behalf. You can have a POA prepared by a lawyer. The fees will vary. They may prepare and bundle multiple documents together. So at the same time as you're doing a POA, you'll do a will and you'll do a healthcare directive at that time. You can have a do-it-yourself. CLIA has a POA kit on their website for a small fee. Did we think it was around 25?
Yeah, it's 25 for an individual or $40 for a couple.
Okay, 25 for an individual, 40 for a couple. And the contents include all kinds of information about power of attorney and all the forms with associated instructions. Again, you can probably go to CLIA and pick one of those up or download it from the website. Once it is prepared, it's really important, again, have copies, multiple copies. Inform your financial institutions, including the CRA and any banks that you deal with. It's good for people to know, like it really prevents a lot of confusion and issues if you inform them in advance. So mitigating risks include the things you don't want your chosen POA to have power over. So in addition to giving them power in your POA document, outline any things you don't want them to have the ability to do. It is in some cases considered best practice to select 2 individuals. You need to be very careful doing that at the same time, but 2 individuals might prevent unethical use of your assets, so there'll be a check and balance there. It's really good if those people get along though, so you know, I know families don't always get along, and even if, like, parents will often select a sibling as their POA, or sorry, a son or daughter as their POA. And then they'll select one son or daughter and then another son or daughter, but if those siblings don't get along, it can create problems. Yes, I've seen it as well, yes. So make sure that the individuals, again, that you're choosing will respect your wishes, and that they can work with the other person. It's also, it can create problems if the person lives out of province or out of country. So consider where they are and how quickly some things, decisions need to be made or things need to be signed. And again, add that enduring POA clause. All right. We'll have time for questions right at the end. I'm just going to go through this last little part. So prearranged funeral plans is an agreement with a funeral home, pay for services in advance of death. The money is held in a trust account until the funeral services have been provided, and any unused amount is refunded. Doing it in advance is less emotional strain on the family in the time of grief. So they don't have to figure these things out. The things are already done. And it can or may save you money depending on the home that you're working with. So number 1, consider your wishes regarding your funeral apart from finances, what you want that to look and feel like, what that experience is for people. Consult with the funeral home about cost of services. You would agree on a payment contract, so it could be a lump sum payment or it could be paid over installments. Take steps to protect your money. So we'll talk about that more in a minute. The funeral home will protect your funds in a trust account. You just want to make sure that you're working with somebody reputable in doing so and that you have contracts in place. So have a written contract. Ask for proof that the money has been deposited in a financial institution. Keep a copy of the trust account information for your records. Make sure you can get your money back if you move, change your mind, or if they go out of business. So asking about each of these things at the time of purchasing the services is important. Yes, thank you again for your patience. I know we're about 10 minutes over time. There's some final resources at the end of this presentation about the Seniors Navigator as well as CLIA, and just a final slide of some things I thought you might be interested in. We do have some time for questions. Nelson is still here. We can take questions on the last part of the presentation or really anything else you have to ask. And if you have to sign off, I just want to thank you for coming and being here today.